Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Leadership Lenses, the podcast designed for heads of school, principals, and anyone else looking to improve and enhance Jewish education. We are thrilled to have with us today a longtime Jewish educational leader who's done some of the most interesting things that we've seen in multiple day schools across the U.S. And this is just the latest iteration of his trailblazing career. Thank you, Rabbi Dr. Gil Perl, for joining us today. Rabbi Perl is currently the head of school at the Jewish Leadership Academy Miami, JLA. He is the founding head of school of a school that really broke the mold and started a new model. And part of what we want to do today is learn about your experience there, Gil, and figure out what everyone else can take and learn from this somewhat different take and somewhat different kind of school that you're running. So thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Excited to have the conversation.
Amazing. So just to get us started, maybe tell us a little bit about where JLA came from. How did you come to be the founding head of school there? And, what are we talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my previous role, I had the opportunity to create an elementary school and a middle school from scratch in Philadelphia through the foundation that I was involved in at the time, which we ultimately then merged with the high school that I was running to create what is today Kohelet Yeshiva. After that experience of creating the elementary school and the middle school, I started doing some consulting for leaders, both inside and outside the Jewish world, who wanted to do something transformational in the educational space. And that is how I met Daniel and Gisela Addis down here in Golden Beach, Miami, back in 2018. And they had felt for some time that there was something missing in the landscape of Jewish education down here in Miami. And they hired me as a consultant just to help them think through what exactly the problem was that they were trying to solve. And in the process of that work together over several years, what emerged were really three things. Number one, there was a perception that, for lack of a better term, there was a brain drain here in Miami, where too large a percentage of the community's most academically able and ambitious kids were opting out of a Jewish day school of education, either right from the outset, kindergarten, pre-K, or particularly after fifth grade. And that was deeply disturbing to them, both for the here and now and for what it means for the Jewish community over the long term. Issue number two was, for the Addises, if nothing else, the product of a Jewish education ought to be young men and women who are dedicated to giving significantly of their time, energy, and resources for others. And they asked the question, are our Jewish day schools producing that? We talk a lot about it, but are we actually giving kids the skill sets they need? Are we exercising that muscle so that when they go out into the real world, it's part of who they are? And the third issue was cost. I'm feeling that there were just too many students who were priced out of a Jewish education. And so we set out to try and solve those three little problems. We actually did iterate initially programs that would work within the existing infrastructure in the Miami landscape of Jewish community. Ultimately decided that to do this right and to do this best required starting something from scratch. And that's how JLA was born.
Amazing. Amazing. So look, it's fortunate and unique to be involved with those kind of visionary founders. And I think they're fortunate to have connected with you to create what is now JLA. What makes JLA different in practice when it's running compared to your typical Jewish community high school?
Yeah. So first of all, we're middle and high school, but so there's a number of things that make us unique. And I think probably the best place to start, which has kind of a ripple effect through everything we do, is that we're really clear in stating that we are not a community school, meaning we are not here to service any particular community in general. Our mission has us focusing on a particular subset of the community. And honestly, I think this is one of the lessons I hope that other communities can take. And I completely understand that this is only relevant in your larger Jewish communities, right? In our smaller Jewish communities, we need community schools, and we need to be pooling our resources to those community schools to make them as good as they can be. But in our larger communities, the idea that our first level of investment should be in our community schools, but that there are subsets of the population who can be better serviced by creating schools that are there to focus on them is something I think we've seen to some degree in the special needs population, which
Hmm.
I know is something a really important investment our community has made over the last 20 to 30 years. But there are other subsets of the population that really could use that kind of investment. So we are that. We are not here to serve the entirety of the Miami Jewish community or the entirety of any of Miami's Jewish communities. We are here to service the high achieving community. Right? The kids who academically have the ability to go well beyond what a traditional schooling experience can offer them. So that's one way in which we're unique. In order to do that, we have to have a very significant admissions process so that we're identifying the right kids, because I don't have classes for kids who can't do honors level work or above. So that's one way in which we're unique.
Hmm.
Second way in which we're unique is the religious space that we inhabit. We run under modern Orthodox auspices, but the vast majority of our student body is not observant at all. And that's intentional. We are intentionally aiming to lower the barrier of entry for families who otherwise would not be choosing, a Jewish day school experience. It happens to be down here in Miami. Most of those families still come from a very kind of traditional bent, right? So that when they're doing Jewish, they want to be doing it in a traditional way. So the modern
Hmm.
Orthodox hospices really works well for them. But there's so much that we do in the Judaic, the life of our Judaics program that would be significantly different than what you would find in a more traditional modern Orthodox yeshiva, yeshiva high school. And then the other thing that I think is really significantly different goes back to that there was an initial problems we were trying to solve, which is around service. We've really tried to take service to others from the periphery of a school program and bring it to its center. So we actually compact our curriculum to 4 days a week. And on our fifth day, we do nothing, none of our core academics. And that day is kind of anchored by something we've developed here that we call our service entrepreneurship program, which is a 7-year scope and sequence designed to graduate students who have launched their own 501c3 organizations before, while still in high school. So there's a lot there.
Yes.
And there's a whole bunch of other places where we've been given the opportunity to sort of think out of the box and try things. But I think those are the core areas that kind of make this a rather different place than your standard.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, no, that is, first of all, it's amazing to hear because, I'm typically at any given time working with 30 or 40 different Jewish day schools. So I have a good sense of the range, and this is definitely occupying a very unique space. And to what you said before, you acknowledge that if you're in a small community, this may not be the right way to go. And many heads of school, even a large community, are not sitting in that place. But the fact that you are so focused on the particular population or subpopulation that you're trying to serve, I imagine enables you to do certain things educationally. And I mean that in the broadest sense, that are harder in a traditional school, but that we can still learn from. So I'm curious what stands out to you as the things you are doing or have done at JLA that might be inspirational for us to learn from for a range of schools.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch. So first of all, just going to our service program, which I already mentioned, there's nothing there that is specific to a high achieving population. What we're doing on that front is something that it does require a significant investment of time, right? And to do that requires all of your stakeholders, to be in on it. Although what we often tell parents is that it's a matter of what your institutional priorities are, right? I often give them the analogy of, imagine you come to school one year and you're at back to school night, and the school announces that this year we're going to be doing math after school. Do it on your own time and bring us a note that says you did it, right? And then we'll give you credit, right? It broadcasts where this is in your hierarchy of values, right? We would never do that with math, but we often do it with service, right? Chesed hours, service hours, do it on your own time, right? Bring us something that says you did it, we give you credit. We felt like if kids were really going to feel like this is core to who we are, it has to be during school. And so we've developed this 7-year scope and sequence. We call it well, I refer to it as a mashup between community service, design thinking, and nonprofit management. And the idea is to expose kids to what others are doing to make the world a better place. That's the community service piece. And we do that through same place, multiple ways, getting a sense, developing a relationship with them, and in sort of thematic units. So where could be this is a unit on the elderly, on hunger, on children, on the environment, but enough time to really sink their teeth into it. And we'll rotate that through two different years. The design thinking piece is intended to help kids now identify what problems still need to be solved, right? And how I begin to think of solutions on my own. And the nonprofit management piece is there to say, okay, once I know how to develop a solution, how do I implement a solution? We actually start first working on project management, right? And then if I've got a project, I've learned how to put a project into place. How do I make that sustainable over the long term? And I would encourage anybody who's interested in thinking about it, learning about it. Rabbi Gil Perl is our campus rabbi. He also directs this program for us, and he'd be more than happy to share. And if it's not that a school is adopting this in its totality, just to begin thinking about if chesed, if service is core to who you are and what you want your kids to be, how are you thinking about it? Not only as a set of individual experiences, but how are you thinking about it as an educator, right? How are you educating around it? How do those experiences build on each other to create the kind of outcome that you're looking for? So that would
Absolutely. And what I love about that, the way you're describing it, is really that sense of how we get serious and thoughtful about that service learning, or what you were referring to in the beginning, what sometimes we just refer to as chesed hours, right? We want you to do chesed, so get a note that you've done X number of hours of service chesed at some point. And you're saying, no. Now, it may not be that other schools can do it the exact same way. It might not be that they can compress into 4 days and do a 5th day around this, but we likely can all think more seriously about how we do this. And it parallels a trajectory we've already seen with a lot of informal education. 30 years ago, Barry Chazan was arguing vociferously for getting serious about formal education. And we've seen that shift, and we've seen schools start to take it more seriously and more thoughtfully. And you're saying, well, the same should be true of everything we want to do with service. It needs to be serious and thoughtful. And you're sharing this example, which I think is really holistic and encompassing about how you build that within your students.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few others that I would encourage people to think about. One, some people have heard of before, and I know what the immediate response to this is, which is, if only we had the funding, we would do this too. But I'm going to put it out there anyway because I think it's worth considering and and thinking about what even this on a smaller scale looks like. But we have given a lot of thought to what Israel education is and ought to be. Come to the same conclusions that many others have around the fact that it needs to be experiential, that simply talking about Israel, from here is not nearly enough. But we also don't think that the 10-day trip to Israel is enough of a formative experience for our kids that can properly educate them and prepare them for the world that they're headed to. So we do the first month of school in Israel for the entire
Wow.
school every year.
So 7th through 12th grade,
Or
all
9
in
through 12th grade. 9 through 12th grade.
9th through 12th grade, all in Israel for the first month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you do with them when you're here? Is that touring? Is it service? Is it educational or academic?
So it is a combination of all the above. We are on campus 3 days a week, and on Tulim 2 days a week, and then service the other half a day, like generally Friday morning. The core of the curriculum is a Jewish history curriculum, and I want to give credit where credit is due. This is the model that Musk has been using for quite some time. Uh, but it's a similar. The core curriculum is similar to that in the sense that we take all of Jewish history from Bereshit to the founding of the state. We divide that into four units. So for ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, their core teachers are all licensed Mori Derech. So they teach them in the classroom, and then the tikulim they do are all bringing what they learned in the classroom right to life. And that then gets coupled with Ulpan, with Torah classes that they take, and then with something in the world of the arts and some physical education. So there's no general studies for that month. It's 100% Israel Jewish history. Oh, sorry. And there's a contemporary Israel component to it. So we'll do the same thing. We'll take 1948 to the present and divide that up amongst our 4 years as well. And then there's what we call Startup Nation component where we're sort of giving them exposure to that world as well. But the goal is that when kids graduate here and they get to college and they're having conversations or worse than that, right, about what's going on in Israel, their response won't be, this is what I learned. It's, hey, I lived there and let me tell you what it was like. So that's what it looks like.
Amazing. Amazing. And so, yes, a lot of schools will respond by saying, that would be great if we had the funding. I'm
Right.
curious if you have any thoughts about, well, how might a school that doesn't have the same access to funding think about an idea? Where could this potentially lead?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a number of things to think about here, right? Which is, first of all, it's a high intensity condensed kind of experience. So we only have 2 periods of Judaics the rest of the year, right? Which is far
Hmm.
less than what, I mean, it's kind of similar to what your community schools are generally offering, but it's less than what your yeshiva day schools, are offering. But our bet is that concentrating this, right, having this kind of experiential experience is going to yield more over the long term than another 45-minute class per day, right, would yield. So thinking about that, how do we create these kind of high impact, intense experiences, and thinking about them just like we were saying with regard to the service, not as one and done, but as things that build that scaffold and build on each other, right? So how does one intense experience one year set the foundation for the experience the next year, right? For 10th grade, for 11th grade, and for 12th grade. Our 12th graders actually begin the month in Poland. So they'll spend the first month in Poland and then go to Israel, which fits with the Jewish history curriculum, right? As we're getting there, right?
Hmm.
That's what they're experiencing. But so I would encourage that. I would encourage that just the basic question: do kids know the story of the Jewish people when they're leaving your school? Right? Do they
Right.
know? Do they still the story of the Jewish people from beginning to the current? Which I don't know that all schools make a priority of that. We do a lot that's sort of again intense and perhaps siloed, right? Rather than thinking about, all right, I want my kid to know where we came from, how we got to where we are.
Right.
Yeah, and
Right.
then
And so
if you are thinking about Israel experiences, how do we tell our kids all the time, this is not a trip, it's a school in Israel, right? And how do you transform? And then they have plenty of fun. There's no question about it. But how do you transform whatever it is you're going to do on that front into something that is kind of active?
absolutely. And so some of the common threads here that I'm hearing are really about this holistic approach and thinking through, as you did with the service. I want to know what the whole trajectory is. We're going to make sure all the parts fit together and build it as one stream. And that's something that you can definitely do with or without an Israel experience if you're a school that can't do that. But you also have multiple access points to Israel experience. And we know that there are things like you mentioned, the Alexander Muss High School in Israel. There's the new Nalech program, which is a reprise of something that happened many years ago. And there may be other ways to do this that can start percolating. And as we see the more intensive challenges that our kids are facing, we can also be able to redouble our efforts to give them that sort of foundation. I
Yeah.
also want to talk about in the classroom because I know you well enough to know that there must be interesting things going on and fascinating things going on inside the regular day-to-day classrooms at JLA, and I'd love to hear about a couple of those.
Yeah. So maybe we'll start with what we're doing in the world of ed tech. We were probably one of the first schools in the world that were built from the ground up post-COVID. And I felt strongly that we were just at the end of COVID. We went into the design process, and I felt strongly that we need to be thinking about, right, what we learned. And I had the great privilege of not being in, that in the same place that my colleagues were in the immediate aftermath of, or end of COVID, where the last thing anybody wanted to do or had the headspace to do was think about what does all this mean for, right, the world of education going forward. But to me, the big takeaway was the idea that two people don't have to be in the same physical space to be sharing the same experience was just going to be part of our world. It's here. It doesn't mean it's better, but it does mean it's an enabler. It means that it opens opportunities, like the opportunity we're having right now. We are thousands of miles away from each other, right? But we can have this experience. So I felt strongly, not that we ought to prepare for the next pandemic, but that this is just a technology that is going to be part of our lives. So I wanted to optimize our classrooms for what then we called hybrid learning, which was the potential for students inside the classroom and students outside the classroom to fully participate in the same classroom experience. And we actually landed up working directly with the engineers at Zoom to
Wow.
create sort of an optimal classroom that would allow us to do that, so that a student who is not in present can actually feel like they are fully immersed in what is happening in the classroom. Happy to describe that to you, but I think more than the sort of the technical specifications of how we did it, it was the result. The result is that we quickly realized that not only does this allow for hybrid learning, which we do, we give our kids 3 Zoom days a semester, meaning you can take it for whatever reason, but you wanted to sleep late, you were traveling with your family, you had a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, didn't want to miss class in the morning, you simply appear on the screen in the back of the classroom, right? And you're marked as hybrid, as remote for that day rather than present. You can take them however you want. But we quickly realized that once we could do that, we could also record everything that was happening in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
The instructions I gave to the engineers in Zoom was no more than one button for my teachers, right? Because more than one button, then it's not going to happen. One button, and with the one button, everything is firing and it's recording. Right? We have 4 cameras in the classroom, in every classroom, and so it automatically records. And then later that evening, it will upload to the class website. Didn't know it at the time, but almost immediately thereafter, those recordings became, and we do it all through Zoom, completely searchable. So you put into the text box, right, parabola, and it will give you the exact moments at which anybody in the class was talking about parabola. So you don't have to go back and watch an entire class. You can go back and watch the thing that you didn't necessarily fully understand. Right? And now, because it's working speech to text, it also means that you can ask it to translate it for you. So if you're an ESOL student, right, and you want to go over your history class in Spanish, you can now do it. You want to translate it all to Hebrew, right? You can do it. It becomes empowering for the teachers, who can now say that when a kid wants help, didn't understand something, did you watch the recording? Did you go back over it? Right? That was kind of stage 2. Stage 3 now, Zoom is AI powered. We also are using a AI platform for our classrooms called Flint. So it generates a transcript. It will generate notes. A teacher can turn on a feature which will automatically send the class notes to the students, which some teachers don't want to do for good reason. But the other thing that it does for the teacher is now I can take those notes, I can throw them into whatever AI platform I want to use and say, make a review sheet, like, create an assessment based not on some hypothetical syllabus somewhere, but on what I've actually done in our classroom. Our students have said that it is something that every school ought to do. They use it all the time for studying, for reviewing. And then my ultimate goal, my sort of V3, which I'm working on now, is I think we're sitting on a tremendous amount of data about what works. And that is both the transcripts are already easily mined for data, but I'm working on figuring out how we mine the video data also, right, for insights and for teachers, for feedback, right, to create a feedback loop for what is working, what isn't working with a particular student, with a particular setup, with a particular curriculum, looking at what's happening in the classroom and automatically looking at what the where our curriculum guides say, pacing wise, where we ought to be to
Mm-hmm.
what on track or not. So I think there's a whole kind of frontier there to be mined, and I'm hoping.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And obviously you're talking about doing this with optimal technology, 4 cameras in a room, which is tremendous. And we should also note that there are schools that are working on this and they can work on this with a very, MacGyvered version. You can do something
100%,
similar with a laptop sitting on a shelf on the side of your room or a phone on a tripod on the side of your room.
100%.
And I do agree with you that one of the next frontiers is thoughtfully and sensitively incorporating AI feedback on video in terms of allowing teachers to improve their pedagogy. Because we know as principals, we cannot be in every room. There's no way. Teachers don't want us in every room. But teachers are one of the few professions where you can't get feedback on the job you're actually doing. And the moment we can open that, it's like opening the door to the classroom and enabling a learning and feedback loop that I think can really skyrocket teaching.
100%. For the teachers themselves, it can be incredibly valuable. For administrators, coaches, mentors, right? It really should give us the capacity to do things we couldn't do before. And this is, look, I'm sure this is your approach as well. But for us, AI is all about empowering the humans, right? It's not about
Hmm.
replacing humans. It's about giving us capacities that we didn't have before, so that we can focus on the distinctly human stuff that we do, right? And do it that much better. And yeah, there's tremendous opportunity. And you're absolutely right. It has to be done sensitively. Obviously, privacy is an issue. But when you build it into the culture, and it is not a tool for gotcha, right? But a tool for
Hmm.
growth. It really can be incredibly powerful.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think, I appreciate you giving so much of your time to us. Obviously, you've got a couple projects that you're working on, which is amazing to hear. If people want to learn more about these, Gil, is it okay if they reach out to you? What's the best way to reach you?
100%. Reach out to me via email, gperl, GPERL, at JOAMiami.org. I may not always be the quickest to respond, but I will get back. I will.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you for that. And what I'm taking from here is really a combination of 3 things. I'm taking the thread around the serious and holistic way that we approach service learning, the need to think holistically about teaching the story of the Jewish people, which I love the way you put that our children graduate knowing that rather than pieces of knowledge here and there and pulling that together from an educational perspective. And then this additional layer that we've just been talking about around what can we do to launch teaching and learning to the next level. So you've created this, internal Khan Academy repository by recording your own classes, empowering teachers and students to use it in a way that works for them and looking at that next level of how we now give teachers different levels of feedback. And I do want to say to everybody listening, obviously JLA is a very unique place and has the ability to do certain things that you may not be able to replicate exactly piece for piece. But each one of these ideas, I think, has echoes and droplets of inspiration that we may be able to incorporate in your average Jewish middle school or your average Jewish high school. And as always, I encourage you listening to try it out and let me know how it goes. You can reach us, as always, at Leadership Lenses on Substack, Barry Kislowitz on LinkedIn, or on our website, kislowitzconsulting.com. Thank you again, Rabbi Dr. Perl, for joining us, and thank you all for listening.